Hello, I'm Jamila Musayeva, an international etiquette consultant, author of etiquette books and pre-recorded online courses. In today's video, based on what I'm wearing, you can probably guess that today's video is going to be about Japan, in particular the 15 etiquette lessons I have discovered for myself in Japan. If you have been following me on Instagram, you know that I have been on a family trip to Japan recently, and just needless to say that I am in love and in awe and admiration of the country, of the culture, of the heritage and traditions. And if I were to pick one place in the world to live, that would probably be Japan. At least for now, that's how I feel. And if you don't follow me on Instagram, make sure that you do so that you get to see the pictures that I've shared from my trip to Japan. The first thing that is very evident and very different from anywhere else in the world is the form of greeting that they do on a regular basis. We probably have seen movies where people bow to each other, and you would think this is something that people do only in certain circumstances, in very formal situations. But having traveled in Japan, I've realized that bowing is just a form of handshake in Japan. You'd rarely see people handshake, maybe in some Western companies or with Westerners, but majority of people, they bow to each other. And I found this greeting form very aesthetically pleasing to watch because there's so much respect in that. And also it's very hygienic because you don't get to touch the other person, you don't intrude into their personal space, you don't have this physical touch with the handshake like you do with a handshake. So bowing is essentially a form of greeting, salutation, thanking the other person. And the way they bow is very interesting because by mere observation of who's bowing more, you can understand who's trying to show more respect towards the other. So essentially, the lower your bow is, the more respect you're paying for the other person. So if you see someone bowing to each other, which is obviously done on both parties, but one bows more than the other, that means they want to show more respect to the person that they are bowing. And there's a difference in the way men and women bow. Men bow with their hands on the sides of their thighs, so with the palms facing their thighs and with the palms open like that. And when they bow, the gaze is on the floor, it's not at the person, you don't look in the person's eye, and then you bow from your back and not your neck. So it's not the bow like you do like this, if you do namaste, but it's rather a bow from the back. For women, the bow is essentially the same, the gaze is also on the floor, also from the back, but here the placement of the hands is different. It's usually up in the front here over the thighs. It could be either up front like this, or it could be one hand over the other. So when you are in Japan, bow rather than handshake. And if you are dealing with a client from Japan and you want to show that you appreciate their culture or know about their culture, you can bow to show that respect. The second etiquette rule that, we get to be taught from early young age on, something that we hear a lot from our parents and our teachers, is please don't forget to say thank you. But somehow we lose that, especially in the Western part of the world. I think it has gotten lost in a daily life. People are so forgetful about thanking the other person. And this is something you will never miss in Japan. They say thank you a lot throughout the day. And you as well as a tourist get accustomed to saying that. It's very nice when you can say it in Japanese. It's a very short phrase. It's arigatou gozaimasu, and this is something that I have learned so well in Japan. And even after coming back, I had this urge to say it here as well. And you would say it multiple times, and you would say it, when you even give something, to the cashier to buy something, when they hand something back to you, when you get into a cab, when you get out of the cab. It is so ubiquitous. It's just everywhere. And what I also realized is that they never get tired of saying that. You say it and they say it back to you, and it is done throughout the day a lot of times. This is something I think Japan doesn't only teach you to say thank you, but they actually, live it as an example. And with the little kids growing up in a culture like that, they're obviously repeating after the adults and being exposed to what they've been preached about is something I think that helps the Japanese to keep the traditions going on, is because this is not just something written in books, but this is something very much practiced. So when you are in Japan, don't forget to say Arigatou gozaimasu. The third etiquette rule is something I have mentioned in the etiquette video about shoes. If you haven't watched it, this is one of my very first videos on YouTube. But I mentioned that in some cultures, in Asian, East Asian, and Middle Eastern cultures, you're encouraged to take your shoes off whenever you enter anything indoors. It could be, a sacred venue, it could be a mosque, a temple, it could be, someone's home. This is something you get to see so much practiced in Japan. I don't think I've ever noticed this much in Middle East even. In Middle East, you'd be, required to take your shoes off when you enter someone's home or when you enter a mosque. But here, you'd even be required to take your shoes off when you enter some little local cafe where there are tatami floors. And this is done, pretty much in a lot of little eateries. And I wouldn't say it's just for upscale restaurants, but really some casual places as well. Especially in Kyoto, you see a lot of little cafes where the shoes are lined up in the front and you see people walking barefoot. You could, of course, walk barefoot, or if you have socks on, you can keep your socks on. But be aware that this is something that you'd be required to do in Japan. So if you don't want to walk barefoot on the floors that are public, you better wear something with socks so you're more comfortable to take off your shoes. And make sure that your socks are clean and that your socks are not with holes, because once you step out, people obviously at the venue can see what you're wearing, and so make sure that they're clean and they don't have any holes on them. The third etiquette rule is something I have actually never noticed anywhere else in the world, but this is something that you would be required to do, is making sure that you carry your trash with you. There are very few trash cans in Japan. We went to Tokyo, went to Kyoto, and we could barely find a trash can. Actually, coming back, I was watching some reels on Instagram. It was so funny because this would pop up every single time that people would make fun of the fact that you can't really find trash bins in Japan. And if you do, it's like you discard everything they've been carrying along with you all day, and they are sorting out the garbage. They're plastic, they're food, there are things that cannot be recycled, and so they're very diligent with sorting out the trash. But also, because they don't have any trash bins around, you have to make sure that you have an extra bag with you, that that's a reusable shopping bag or a little plastic bag that you have with you, that you can discard all your trash in and carry around with you until you finally find a trash bin. This brings me to the fifth point, and I think this is something that you probably see in some Western countries as well, but this is something that I paid particular attention to in Japan, is that they all carry reusable shopping bags with them in their little bags. And they have really amazing reusable bags that can be squished into a form like this. And you see people do it everywhere, because plastic bags that you get in a shopping or a paper bag is for an extra fee, which is something I've seen, practiced a lot in the Western countries as well. But people still are not so mindful of it, and people would still buy it in the markets. On my third day already in Japan, I bought a reusable bag and carried it with me, so that whenever we did shopping, we would have like a bag that I would, open up and fill it with the things, so we wouldn't be buying extra paper bags or a plastic bag. This is something that could go, hand in hand with etiquette, but also with just being mindful about the environment. And just, it also makes you, whenever you shop, look so much more, I want to say, upscale, more elegant, because instead of carrying your, paper bags or plastic bags, you're carrying something, a beautiful reusable bag that, can actually look like a part of your casual attire. The sixth etiquette rule, I think that everyone should obey, and this is one of the biggest etiquette mistakes I see being broken, especially in the US, and this is something that is carefully observed in Japan, is that they don't eat and walk. This is something that you would never notice in Japan, that people are walking and eating. There are a lot of little shops, little supermarkets with snacks and fast food, but you'll never see people buy it and walk on the street and eat. They'll either stand outside of the market in a little, designated place or somewhere closer to the wall and eat, finish, discard into whatever trash they have into the trash bin, and then walk off. I haven't in my trips, but if you have seen it in Japan, please comment down in the section below, because in my trip to Kyoto and Tokyo, I have never noticed anyone be eating and walking. Even us, so on our first day, my kids got some snacks and wanted to eat them in 7-Eleven, and we were asked to exit 7-Eleven and eat on the outside, close to the market. They said you can stand there and eat there, but not inside. So I found it very fascinating, and I think they also make the tourists also follow these rules, and that also keeps everyone in order. So everyone has to respect the rules of the country, and this is very much endorsed and very much required. And this is also, I think, from the point of even digestion and mindful eating, this is a great habit to incorporate into your daily life, because when you walk and eat, you don't really understand what you ate, but when you stand or sit and eat, you are mindful of the eating process and you feel that you have eaten something. So there is no mindless eating and snacking all day long. This is something we can all incorporate in our daily life. The 7th etiquette rule is that there is no smoking in public. Probably it's one of the very few countries that I've been to that I have seen very few people smoke. You know, a lot of the countries where I've visited, there people usually smoke one form of cigarette. It could be vaping, it could be electronic cigarette or the regular cigarette. But in Japan, I didn't really see many people smoking, and even those that were smoking, you are usually foreigners and tourists, and you're not allowed to smoke in public. There are only specific designated areas where you can walk in and smoke. It's also outdoors, but it's like enclosed space, so you know you can only smoke there. This is something that you should be aware of if you are a smoker and you plan to travel to Japan, that there are very few places where you can smoke, and you really have to respect that rule. The 8th etiquette rule that I came across in Japan is something very specific to Japan, is that if you have tattoos on your body, you're not allowed to enter into public bath or public hot springs. This actually was something that was surprising. Actually, I knew about this rule before, but I didn't understand why. So we were told in one of the ryokan that we stayed, there was a public bath and a hot spring outdoors. It was very beautiful. They asked us if you have any tattoos, you're not allowed to enter it. And the reason is because it goes back to the whole idea of the Yakuza, the country's local mafia. They're covered in tattoos. So for them to be hindered from entering this public bath, there was this general rule that if one has tattoo, one is not allowed into a public bath. And also we were told that it goes back to the Edo period, when the criminals were punished by having tattoos on their body, having imprinted tattoos on their body. And so to deter the criminals from entering into public bath, they would just put into place this policy. And nowadays, in very traditional public baths, this rule still applies. So if you have tattoos on your body, you will not be allowed to enter. But some places have modified their rules for foreign visitors and also the youth, now that tattoos are not just a sort of punishment or doesn't express the belonging to a mafia or group of people, or group of criminals. It's just the way people self-express. Some places have made these rules more flexible, but if you are going to stay in a traditional ryokan, and if you are going to go to a public bath, be aware that if you have tattoos, you'll not be allowed. So having public bath and the importance of hygiene brings me to another important etiquette rule that is something that I always endorse in all my classroom. There's a whole segment dedicated to grooming and hygiene and how that's a big part of etiquette. This brings me to the point about smelling good is such an important part of etiquette, of grooming and hygiene in Japan. I actually took a picture of a sign that I saw when we were entered this little ramen, very popular ramen eatery, and there were a couple of signs about rules of etiquette, what you're supposed to do and what you're not. And one of the rules was that smelling bad was prohibited. So if you have an odor on your body, you would be prohibited from entering this venue. I understand it because there are two segments to it. First, you are in a very small, usually these eateries are very small for a limited number of people, in a very closed indoor space. So if you smell bad, you obviously are going to ruin the appetite of other people, and it's also disrespectful towards others to walk in somewhere without having a proper hygiene. I never have seen a restaurant where smelling bad was prohibited. So this actually made me smile and made me take a picture of it. I'll share it with you now on the screen as well. So smelling good is so important. And there's so many things in their pharmacies and in their skincare stores that is around smelling good. There are specific creams for making sure that you don't have any odor on there's specific creams for your underarms. There are a number of deodorants that they have, from powder to cream to spray. It's just insane. The amount of mouthwashes and things for refreshing your breath, the amount of different sorts of shampoos that they have, including wet tissues that are in the form of dry shampoo. They even have these little drops in the pharmacies that you can take to yourself with you in public bath, or if you're at work, and you basically put some drops into the toilet so that after you've used it, it doesn't smell. The importance of smelling good is just on another level in Japan, and this is something we can all learn from Japanese. The next etiquette rule, which is something that is a mistake in a lot of other parts of the world, also a huge mistake if you're in a Western etiquette, and that is slurping. We know that from young age on we hear, don't slurp, chew with your mouth shut, make sure you don't make any noise when you're chewing. But in Japan, only when you're eating ramen or when you're eating some hot broth soup, slurping in some places, especially these local eateries and really like family run restaurants, I wouldn't say upscale, but more casual and family run places and little cute authentic restaurants, you are actually encouraged to slurp, because when you're slurping your ramen, you're really almost like inhaling the broth, and that shows how much you appreciate what you're eating. We went to this little cafe in Kyoto after seeing this beautiful temple, and we went to this little ramen place, and I would just hear everyone slurp, and then my kids started laughing, and I told them, please don't repeat this at home, but when in Japan, it's okay to do so, and it's actually encouraged that you do so, because that way you show appreciation to the chef, who's usually very close to you, because these places are very small, and usually the chef is around, serving, watching you eat, and they really appreciate when you slurp and show how much you love what you're eating. The next etiquette rule that is, again, very particular to Japan, but something that's considered a mistake everywhere else in the world, and that is no tipping. Everywhere else in the world, you have to tip, but Japan and some Asian countries. In Japan, in particular, you should never tip, because tipping can be offensive to the people that are servicing you. They take their job with so much responsibility, with so much love and dedication, and they do it, out of love, that they feel like whenever you're tipping them, it's almost offensive to show that you need extra money to do your work with love. So it could be hurtful to the actual people of service. It was interesting that on our first date, we knew that there is no tipping etiquette in Japan, but we decided to put money on the bed. Usually that's a sign in everywhere else in the world that you can take this money. This is for tipping, for, cleaning up the room. Came back to find that the money was put back on the bed once it was all serviced. It was cleaned and the money was put again back on bed. And so we knew this was a clear sign that even in a hotel, they don't take tips. The next etiquette rule is something I found amazing for myself, because I'm usually a very quiet speaker. I have a very quiet voice tone, and so this was a blessing for me, because everyone else in Japan speaks in very low tones. It's actually looked negatively upon if you speak in very high volumes, if you scream, if you shout, if you even handle some calls in public. There's so many people living in Tokyo and Kyoto. It was very, very densely populated, and there were so many tourists as well, and we went to all these touristy temples, and there's so many people, but you could barely hear people. The noise was minimal to the amount of people that were there. You would never hear people, shout, scream, call each other. If people did it, it was most likely the tourists, but even the tourists were encouraged not to speak in high volumes and make sure that they speak in lower volumes. And that actually made me realize how the reason people in the West always feel the urge to speak up because no one else is hearing them is because of this negative outcome of everyone else speaking very on high volumes. And so we're constantly agitated by these really loud noises in our surroundings. Whereas in Japan, I never felt the urge that I had to speak up or speak more loudly, because their tone was actually lower than mine. So I was always heard, and I found it very beautiful and very calming in general to be in an environment where everyone else was very quiet. And there was some beauty in this quietness, because you were able to enjoy everything else so much more. We were in the sakura season, so in these temples with a lot of people and sakura blooming, we could actually enjoy the nature so much more because there was really no noise in the background. Another etiquette rule that is particular to many Asian countries, but in Japan I saw it practiced every day, and from this pharmacy to stores to supermarket to cabs, everywhere people handing things with both hands. You know, you would be at a cashier to get your grocery or in a pharmacy to get some medicine. You would be handed with both hands and you'd have to receive with both hands. And there was something so beautiful about it. I don't know if you've ever experienced the difference between handing something with one hand versus handing something with two hands. There's just so much appreciation in the moment, in that thing, in the interaction. There's so much care and respect shown in the process that I adored it, and I thought I would want to bring this practice back to my own country. But I don't know how people would react if I were to hand everything with two hands. You know, they would receive the card with two hands. They would hand you the hotel keys with two hands. And just practice it at home to see the difference in how you feel when things are being given to you or you receive things with two hands. There's so much more appreciation in that. Another etiquette rule that I came across, my first interaction in a store, and then I went to the bank and I saw it actually being practiced everywhere, and I made a mental note on that. Again, this is something that comes from my own observation, but you know, correct me if maybe this was particular to my experience. I saw that people do not hand money into the other person's hand. So you'd rarely ever see anyone hand in cash like that. In a lot of the stores that I would make a purchase, and Japan is very cash heavy, people in a lot of places, in a lot of stores and in a lot of cafes would ask you to pay with cash instead of card, which I found very fascinating because this is a super technological country. But that's another point. So they'd always provide you with a little tray where you could put the money and they would take it with their both hands. So my first interaction with handing cash was in a store. I went and I shopped, and it was a pharmacy / skincare store. She told me, you know, pay with cash. And so when I was going to make a payment with cash, I handed in the cash like that, and she was like, no, like, don't give it to me. There was a specific machine that I would have to insert the cash. It would count the cash and give me the change. So she wasn't actually handling the cash on her own. This was in a more technological store. And then we were in a little shop in Kyoto buying souvenirs. And there, when I had to make the payment with cash, you know, I wanted to hand in the cash, and he was like, no. So he handed me a tray. I made the payment. I put the money on a tray. He took the tray, you know, did the transaction, and then returned the rest of the money on a tray as well. I think it's just also part maybe of hygiene, maybe part of, you know, appreciation for the money, appreciation for the interaction, transaction. And I found that very fascinating that, you know, people handle the money with so much respect. And the final etiquette rule for today's video that I discovered myself in Japan is that etiquette is a huge part of their life. I have never been to any country that puts so much emphasis on etiquette, which is probably why I loved it so much. It was very endearing to me that this much progress is made in a country, and, you know, yet in the West people think that, you know, we've made the progress, why do we need etiquette? But here's Japan, so much more progress than the West in many ways, but still with so much emphasis on etiquette, and it's actually taught from young age on to kids in schools, and by parents, by teachers, by society, by community. The reason I particularly wanted to emphasize etiquette is because the word etiquette comes from these little signs that used to be put in the palace of Louis XIV, where he would basically tick and point what are the things you should do and should not do. Like, you should not step on the grass in the palace, you should wear this when you come to the palace. So basically a ticket of instructions of what should be done and should not be done. And that's where the word etiquette comes from. And I realized that in Japan, they're still practicing it. Despite of being super technological, they choose to place signs in every public venue, in the bathroom, how to properly use the bathroom, in this, you know, in the toilets, how to properly use the toilet, in the restaurants, how to properly take your seat, clean after yourself, what you're supposed to wear, what not to wear. So you will see these etiquette signs everywhere showing or explaining to you what to do. And you think, why would they write this signs? You know, it's obvious that you should be doing this. But I guess it's to remind people day in and day out of how they should behave, and that's how they're able to keep up with these good manners in this very densely populated country, and from generation to generation. I think this is something that we can take on from Japan, and even with certain rules that we think are so obvious, we can, write out little signs and put them up in every single place, public space, reminding people of how to behave properly. So this was the end for today's etiquette video on Japan. If you have any interesting observations that you made on your own trip to Japan or from working with Japanese, please do write it down in the comment section below, share it with my audience. And if you have any video suggestions, I'm always eager to take notes on those. Please do write again in the comment section below. If you want to learn more in depth about etiquette, you can get my etiquette books that are online, available on my website in English language only, and they're available for worldwide shipment. Also, if you want to learn even in more depth about etiquette, you can join my pre-recorded online etiquette courses. One is called Western Formal Dining Etiquette from A to Z, that prepares you for a Western dining experience. It has video tutorials with subtitles in Spanish, English, and Arabic. And the second etiquette course is called The Art of Entertaining at Home, that teaches you how to host people at home, how to set up a table according to 4 different seasons, how to wrap gifts, something that Japanese people really love to do. Also, if you want to learn even in more depth about etiquette and you want to have this exclusive content, you can join my Patreon Etiquette Movie Club, where every month I feature an etiquette analysis of different kind of movies. So far I've done over 40 different movie analysis, and by joining it now you can access all those movie reviews. That is very exclusive only for my patrons. So if you've made until this point of this video, that means you're the most patient one, and as a reward I always share my outfit of today's video at the very end of my video. So for today's video, I opted to wear something that would tell you that I've been to Japan, and this is a kimono I bought in an airport right before embarking on my plane. I saw this little souvenir shop that was also selling kimonos, and they're quite affordable. It's just a regular kimono made of cotton, super comfortable, great to wear at home, but also really nice to wear if you want to show your style. Something that you've been to Japan, like I've done for this video. It didn't come with a belt, so I styled it with an Hermes belt that I had, and I'm wearing it as a dress, but I can also wear it as a cardigan, as a paired with jeans and white tee. I think it looked really nice with ballet flats, and use this kimono as a jacket, especially in springtime or fall. So for the shoes, I've opted to stay barefoot for today's video because I want to be very comfortable in this kimono. Thank you so much for watching this video until this very end, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye!